Good evening. I'd like to call to order the January 11th, 2022 Public Works Committee meeting. Due to the pandemic, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, a roll call vote will be conducted. The committee member will be recognized, raise their hand, and state their vote. Committee members are Councilmember Barbara Haynes Burke, Vice Chair, Councilmember John Larson, Councilmember Annette Scipio, and myself, Jeff McIntosh. I do want to announce that the City Council meeting originally scheduled for January 17th will be held on the 18th in observance of Martin Luther King's birthday. So with that, can I go ahead and ask if there are any consent agenda items that committee members or council members would like pulled? If not, if I could get a motion to approve.
Move for approval. Second.
I have a motion for approval and a second. If the clerk could take a roll call, please.
Councilmember Burke.
Yes.
Councilmember Larson.
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to our one general agenda item, which is information on traffic calming policy. And for that, we'll turn to Aaron King and or Tonique McCullough.
All right, thank you, Councilmember McIntosh and council members. I'll kind of tee this up for Rod. Rod's going to share a little bit of information with you this evening. One of the things we just want to spend a little bit of time with the committee on tonight is our traffic calming policy, and just talk through some challenges that we have with the policy as it's currently constituted, and kind of what's caused some of those challenges, some potential opportunities to alleviate those. And just maybe a path forward to consider some revisions to the policy that makes it a little bit better for the neighborhoods, for our elected officials, and for all parties involved moving forward. So I will turn it over to Rod Ring and our DOT to let him share a little bit of information about this with the committee.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, Chairman McIntosh and members of the Public Works Committee, Rod Ring, DOT. I'd like to take just a brief moment to give you an overview of the traffic calming policy as it exists now. As you all are aware, it was adopted by council in 2003. Prior to that, there wasn't a mechanism by neighborhoods and residents along streets to address concerns such as speeding and cut through traffic and safety. The policy was put together with a group of neighborhood representatives, and meetings were held, and it worked very well in the beginning. Just to sort of summarize the process, initially a neighborhood would get together, and with as few as 7 people, they could submit a one-page petition requesting a study for traffic calming. We would go out and we would collect data, and we would assign point values to criteria such as speed, volume, lack of sidewalks, that sort of thing. And if you met a 30-point minimum score, then you're eligible to move forward in the traffic calming process. DOT staff would talk to their neighborhood's traffic calming task force, get an idea of what measures that they would be supportive of, and then we would develop a plan. We would share that preliminary plan with the council member of the ward and then with the task force. We would make any revisions that were recommended at that time, and then we would take that plan to the neighborhood for a neighborhood meeting, in person or virtual, depending on the circumstances. After that neighborhood meeting, if there weren't any significant changes, then we would send out ballots to all the property owners and the residents alike, and a vote would be taken, and by 70% margin, they must approve the plan. If approved, then we would take it to City Council for final approval and funding. So that's a real short synopsis of the policy as it exists now. One of the issues that we're having now is an explosion of requests. We've got a lot of folks calling in, as you probably noticed on the informational item. We've got 26 active projects. We've got 3 pending traffic collection. And over the past year, we've had at least 85 formal requests for information on the traffic calming policy. That doesn't include phone calls and other things that we don't really keep track of when we answer a phone and somebody else starts asking about traffic calming. And the issue that we're having is that to keep up with the demand and other demands of the department. We're falling behind on citizens' expectations. And in order to try to change and meet those expectations, we've given you a few ideas that we've thought about, and I'll go through them briefly. Create an online overview video to give people an idea of the process and what it would all take. A lot of times when we initially talk to folks, we give them the policy and they don't read the entire policy and don't fully understand how interactive the policy is. So we think that would help. The other thing too is the participation in the meeting to talk about the proposed traffic calming plan. Lately, we've had very little participation in the meeting. And in talking to Raleigh and some other cities, they have used a method where they create a video that explains the whole plan in detail, leaves it up for 2 to 3 weeks for folks to view it, and then they could contact staff directly by email or however by phone to get specific questions answered. Another potential would be to limit the number of petitions that we receive a year. I know that doesn't sound great, but I think in order for us to address concerns in a timely manner, we need to be able to handle the amount of projects that are coming in. This could be anywhere from 10 to 15. That number could vary depending on the size of projects and the complexity of them. And temporarily suspend new projects so we can take care of the backlog. And one of the last things, we do have a number of folks who inquire about traffic calming on streets that are 500 feet or less. Typically, our traffic calming devices are spaced about every 500 feet. So a street that's not the distance of the minimum of a traffic calming device, we think should not continue in the traffic calming process. There's other ideas as well. It wasn't mentioned here in the informational item, but Raleigh in this part of their process, they require that a street or a neighborhood has at least 50% committed participation before they move into the traffic calming process. I think some folks underestimate what it's going to take to get their neighbors involved, to get them to return the ballots, even though we do our best to get the neighborhood involved. We send out the ballots. We have return address and return stamps, and we still have issues with people responding. And as you know, if folks don't respond, then it's considered a vote against the process. This is just a few of the ideas that staff has. What we're really looking for is the feeling and some direction from council, what you would like to see. Any ideas that you have, and then we can work on some revisions, amendments to the traffic calming policy and bring it back to you later on with some more substantive actual action items. And I know that was short and quick, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I got questions from committee or other council members. I know you all are dealing with this in your own wards. This is a citywide issue. So I'm interested in hearing your all's thoughts or questions. Councilmember Larson.
Yes, thank you, Ron. That was a very interesting presentation. And yes, it is. We're just inundated with these concerns about speeding, particularly in neighborhoods. The video, I think, is a great idea. And we're very used to seeing concise video presentations that explain a lot of information. And I would highly support that. I mean, I guess one of the questions would be, is there a way to personalize it or target specific? In other words, you have a generic presentation, but people are most interested obviously in their street and whether or not this is going to be able to be massaged in a way that begins to address their particular area. I like the idea of length of a street, to have a significant enough mass of street to make it worthwhile to spend staff time in developing that. And I think that's certainly something to consider. I thought it was very interesting to see the West End proposal that we just approved earlier and the complexity of that whole proposal. numerous intersections and complexity of curb lines and crossings and stop signs and what have you. I noticed the speed bumps were not really a part of that episode. So it's interesting that we can do things that don't necessarily go immediately to speed bumps, which is what so many people immediately turn to when they think about speed control. So those are just a few thoughts that I have. Thank you.
And
Councilmember
I do,
Scipio. I'm sorry.
I do agree. I believe we would do two videos, one overall video of the policy and how the interaction and how the policy overall works. And then another video for specific neighborhood projects that would go item by item for what the project entails and what the proposal is. So yeah, I agree. Two would be what we would need to do.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes. Thank you, Rod. I just love the traffic comment and having worked with you on quite a few in my area. It's complicated. One of the things that I believe we have to be aware of is that in some neighborhoods, many of them in the East Ward are mostly renters occupied, but they're long-term renters. They oftentimes complain, but they don't think they have the power and to make a difference. They do sometimes come to the community meetings. I know we've had a problem with getting them to come to the meeting, although they're virtual. And I don't know if that's because some of them just don't have the technology. But at some point, the process is really long. By the time we have people ask, it's going to be months before there's a resolution. So if we could figure out how to make it a quicker turnaround time, and maybe if you get the 7 people petition it, maybe you don't need to have the public hearing on the plan because they really believe you're the experts. And I just think sometimes that might be creating a little bit more time, having that second hearing for people to look at the plan. I think that requires a lot of time. But I think we have to be real sensitive about who the residents are and how they engaging. And maybe the reason they're not engaging is because they don't think they have the power to do that. And some of the owners, I think your letters go out to the owner of record, and many of them are out of town. So to say a lack of a return is a no vote, I don't think that should be interpreted that way. I think if you get people to vote for it, go with the vote.
Well, one of the things that the policy evolved through is I do agree when we first started, we were sending it exclusively to the property owners, but it didn't take us long to determine that we also needed to send invitations and ballots directly to the households, to whoever is living there, the residents of the household, which we do. And we also sent English and Spanish, and we tried to make it as easy as possible. And we haven't had as much issue with absentee property owners replying as you think we would. Initially, I thought that would be a huge hangup, but for the most part, absentee property owners respond because I think it directly impacts their revenue, I guess you'd say, for people renting. But it's all challenges to get people. And one of the things that I kind of like about the idea of putting a video what's specific to a project, given the details and what we're proposing and the locations is folks can, instead of having to watch it on a specific time or attend a specific night, it could be a link to a YouTube video, and they could have 2 to 3 weeks at their leisure to view it. And then staff would be happy to answer questions if they call, contact us by email or any other means. So I hope that could get more folks involved. And if folks are involved quicker, that tends to speed the process up.
Thank you. Councilmember Mundy and then Councilmember Haynes. Burke.
Thank you. I'm not a committee member, but just to throw in my 2 cents on a couple of things. I think the idea for a YouTube video is great. And the more you can, information you can make available online as far as a Q&A, to for people to have a resource to help themselves as much as possible, which would take a little bit of the burden off of your staff. And then the other thing, you mentioned this just once, but the possibility of suspending any new work until you get caught up on the backlog. You know, if your department is like so many others and you're short staffed, now is probably one of the only times you can beg for forgiveness and put things off until you get caught up with that backlog. But if you don't do that, then you just keep adding more, and the backlog gets bigger, which is frustrating for the people who are already on the list and the new people on the list. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Well stated. That's exactly the reason why we're talking this evening.
Councilmember Burke.
Thank you, Chair McIntosh. Also, thank you, Mr. Ring. I think that the online video explaining the traffic calming process and the options that our citizens have, I think it's a great idea. I just want to say, Councilmember Mundy, you said what I was going to suggest. We need to also add frequently asked questions. And you all know what they are over the years. You can put those together and go ahead and provide those answers. And that will equip our citizens with as much information as possible as they go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said, well stated. Councilmember Larson.
Is there a cap on how much money we can spend a year on traffic calming? Is there a specific budget line item for that?
I think we run out of staff time before we run out of money.
That was the next question. How much staff? Is it you, Ron? Is that basically staff when somebody said?
When I say staff, it's basically me.
That's what
I got someone here in the office who does maps for me and another person who assists mainly with just sending out information packets to the almost daily requests we get for traffic calming concerns and want to know how to get to the process.
You've got a good manual, a physical manual that you've made available. I've seen that, and it's very comprehensive. But again, people probably don't read as much as they look at videos these days.
No, they don't. And even with the one-page sort of guideline sheet, folks a lot of times don't pay a lot of attention to that either.
I'm a little concerned about putting a quotient on how many of these we're going to process in a year, because some of them, I don't know what your average time is on some of them. I know it must be more complicated. The West End one must have taken an incredible amount of time to get all that engineered, done. But I'm a little hesitant to just say, well, we're only going to do 15 this year and that's it. I don't know whether we create a backlog that we're willing to carry a backlog of 10, and then we're not willing to add any more to that at any given time. But it's a sort of floating number, as it were. And when things fall off one end, we add another one on it. But so we always have a backlog, but it's a controlled amount. Maybe a way to look at it in a way that gives you. The other thing is, of course, is get the city manager to give you more staff. No problem doing that, right, Lee?
Councilmember Larson, I'll throw in a little bit on that. And this is a discussion that Rod and Tanique and myself had a little bit. I think it kind of comes out of the Raleigh model, where they kind of have a yearly deadline by which they accept applications for traffic calming all year, and they shut the door, they take in what they've got, and they basically say, we're going to call it 15 over the course of the next 12 months. And the benefit in that is that's helpful. One, to kind of know about how much you're going to do in a year. And I think they probably derived that number by probably looking back at what they've typically done over some years in the past, and we could probably come up with that number. The other thing that's helpful about that is it's very helpful in being able to kind of budget staff, resources, time, and thinking through the process about how we can kind of manage these things moving forward. That's also helpful to neighborhoods to kind of give them a little bit better time frame and estimate about when these things might occur and how these things can occur. So, if the committee directs staff to investigate changes to the policy, that might be something that we look at to add a little bit of predictability into the equation, and we can figure out kind of what a number may or may not be, or kind of what that may or may not look like. But that was some of the thought process behind that.
Okay.
Okay, I've got a comment or two. I mean, one of the things that I want to do with Public Works Committee is to offer as much information to council members that so that they can feel equipped when they get a request from their constituents to give them really like, you know, the reality of what they're going to face when they ask for something to be done. And then let me go ahead and go to Councilmember Burke here, and then I'll come back to my comments.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Mr. Ring. About how many of our residents request traffic calming information, and once provided with this information, there's not a follow through for the traffic calming to be put in their neighborhoods once they have this information?
I don't have an exact number, but I can give you my feeling. For the folks who read what we sent them, the packet and the informational sheet, if their expectation was to just call and then we come out next week and put it down, those folks drop out. So I'm gonna say that maybe 10% of our inquiries develop into a traffic calming study and then move into the process.
So it's safe to say that with the online video providing this information, that the number of requests might just automatically reduce. Do you think?
I think it'll give people a better expectation of the process, what is expected of them. You know, and as the rest of the council members know, unless there's somebody in the neighborhood that's going to pick up the torch, go door to door, make telephone calls, this process does not happen for them. So the video has to make it clear as possible. This is not a phone call and we come out next week and put speed cushions down, which, believe it or not, a lot of people, that's what they ask when they call us. You probably hear it as well. When can you come out here? Or they're paving my street now. It wouldn't take much to put a speed hump down while they're here. So that's the expectation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Scipio.
There is a speeding problem throughout our city. Everybody's speeding on almost every street. We could be proactive as a city and put down speed bumps, but it probably would take us assessing the streets that have higher speeding and then just do it, as opposed to having residents decide and try to get a request in, because some communities just aren't together. The neighbors don't talk to each other, but the speeding is going on. So I don't know if we've ever thought about just having a policy of putting speed bumps down on high traffic and high speeding streets.
Councilmember Scipio, I think it's been more on a sort of complaint request basis rather than a proactive basis to study and put those speed humps in proactively.
Yeah, but maybe we need to be thinking about a proactive approach as opposed to when people complain.
There is a cost to putting speed bumps down, not just the installation of them. From a public safety standpoint, from wear and tear on vehicles, it's not the sort of no-brainer solution that everybody thinks is just, let's just go do that. And the repercussions that I have felt and that I've gotten feedback on from my constituents in a lot of cases are repercussions that I did not expect to hear from folks. So they're not as universally loved as you might think. There are pluses and minuses to them. So I think, and your constituents will tell you that too. I mean, once they're installed, you'll have lots of people calling you saying, you know, why did these go in? I didn't hear anything about this. It's tearing up my car. It also impacts snow removal. So they are not a universal solution to things. So I'm sorry, Councilmember Larson.
It seems to me that Councilmember Bessie, who hated speed bumps, actually got council to approve a guideline. Can somebody remind me exactly what those requirements were that he imposed, that he got the council to approve? Do you remember that, Rod?
Yeah, we limit the number of vertical measures, i.e. speed cushions, to no more than 6. And using industry standards, that would keep the the response time for fire trucks and emergency vehicles, keep it from slowing the response time greater than 1 minute. So the longer stretches of the road, we could even space them at 500 feet. If a road is longer than that, the 6 is the maximum we can do on that route. And the policy also talks about not putting vertical measures on designated emergency response routes or thoroughfare streets, just due to the volume and the characteristics of the roadways.
Begins to impact what Councilmember Scipio was talking about, probably.
Yeah.
So we'd have to change the ordinance.
And also consider that some of the higher speed roadways are NCDOT, which they don't allow traffic calming on their roadways.
So is this an action item or just an information item?
It's information item.
Okay, so I liked the idea of creating an educational component to this. Rod, how many of these have we stood in front of neighborhood groups and talked about? I mean, you know, many, and we often say the exact same thing. That I think we can do a lot of good by having I'm going to call it a canned presentation, but something that, you know, the high points that we hit all the time. And I think it's important for us as council members to let people know that there is no silver bullet when it comes to speeding. It's going to happen. Your average car coming out of Detroit now has over 200 horsepower in it. You know, cars are faster. People are less attentive. There's a lot more distractions. And so we're facing an increasingly difficult situation. So we've had these problems in the past. I sense all of us on council are seeing more of them. And it's not just as easy as speed bumps. Having done a bunch of these, a lot of times speed bump is just going to push the problem to another area. So, you know, it's that whack-a-mole deal. So it gets it gets very complex. My first traffic calming request, I thought, oh, this is great. Well, you know, I'll just jump in here as a council member and I'll get this thing solved and everybody will be happy. It never happened. And 2 years later, the back and forth, just, you know, we couldn't get the percentage of people to agree on it. And so setting people's expectations about what we can do as council is important. We'll do everything we can, but even then it doesn't always stop the knuckleheads. You'll get people to come up to a speed bump, slow down, and then tear off after it. So, you know, there's no perfect solution. So we try to find ways to calm traffic. But it seems like it's a losing battle. Although I know we got to fight it because it really is something that's on people's minds. I don't want to shorten the process. I don't think it's good. I think we need the citizen involvement. I think if we act quickly, then we often don't hear voices that need to be heard in the conversation. But I do think that having this educational component up front that covers kind of the boilerplate educational side of it is very, very good. I think we have a great communications department, so I think we can put together something that is balanced and well thought out and informative. And then after that, when people maybe realize that every problem isn't going to be solved by a speed bump, you know, the requests maybe are not quite so loud. But it's something that I think we need to work on. And I think it's important to set people's expectations about you know, when the work can actually be done. If a city of Raleigh is doing about, Aaron, would you say about 15 a year?
Rod, is that about right?
Yeah, and they look at that number each year and adjust it depending on the complexity. And what they also do is they rank the projects from most important to, well, I don't want to use the word least important. Every project is important, but some of them have some verified safety concerns that have been demonstrated. Along with
Those critical needs.
Yeah, the critical needs, yes.
So I think if we come up with a measure based on our population versus their population and come up with some metric, you know, some number, and then if they go well and we handle them quickly, then we can, you know, pull stuff off that put stuff on the list that wasn't on there before. So I think this is a great start. I don't think we're going to solve speeding, but I do think we need to manage it as best as we can. And specifically in residential neighborhoods where, you know, where the need is, the safety is the biggest issue. Councilmember Larson.
Two observations. One is when we get our 90 additional policemen, on the streets. Perhaps we could traffic control better, and that would be a lovely thing to have happen, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Second question really, is this an administrative matter? Is this a council matter for the policy development? Is this something that can be handled within the city manager's office as a refinement, or will this need council approval if we start changing, for example, the number of applications we're willing to receive yearly? I know in things like Turn, where we're dealing with household projects, that doesn't seem to be, they seem to have been arbitrarily limited the number of applications they would receive till they caught up with the backlog and other matters like that. I'm just trying to figure out how this will be, how we can move this thing forward on what track.
So council would need to adopt a revised policy. If you're interested in staff exploring that, we would just need direction from this committee to go back and explore revisions to the policy. We can do that, and we can bring that back to you in subsequent months for your review and potential adoption.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would like staff to come back with a policy recommendation specifically addressing some of the things we've talked about tonight. We may tweak it, we may send it back to you again, but I think we need to move the thing forward. It's not going to get any better. So I think it's appropriate the staff take the next step and give us something concrete to push against.
Councilmember
The video is not, I mean, that's an in-house matter, as far as I can tell, educational outreach as a sort of a departmental policy issue. But if we start limiting public involvement or procedure, then maybe that is a council matter. And so I need to know what the council is going to actually approve.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about limiting public participation. I think we're just talking about setting people's expectations about when we can actually solve their problem. Councilmember Mundy.
Would this policy include other schools, if you will, like speed zone ahead or reduced speed ahead or signage or, you know, a flashing light? There are other things, and I don't know if those are considered part of the traffic calming, but I think to put in a speed bump is a significantly larger change than putting up a sign. So how do signs come into play with policies on this?
I can answer the sign question. If you're specifically talking about speed limit signs, those are, we send those to the council, to the Public Safety Committee as we do evaluations. And typically you'll see ones that come through for council to adopt an ordinance reducing the posted speed limit on residential streets from 35 to 25. I think the list of that is probably 2,000 plus now. So that's not, although posting the speed limit is one of the first things that we look at when we're looking at traffic calming. It isn't a traffic calming measure because unfortunately posting 25-mile-per-hour speed limit signs
doesn't make a
25
difference miles an hour.
No. School zones are the same thing. We adopt those based on a standard really set by the MUTCD, and that's not a traffic calming measure either. And we're really reluctant to use stop signs as a traffic calming measure because of their losing their effectiveness at intersections. But those are outside of traffic calming. Does that answer your question?
It does. So the policy that you're talking about right now would not include signage. It really is just the traffic calming measure.
It's just the traffic calming
Well,
devices.
it's whatever works in the situation, because there's a lot of different factors that go into, you know, different spots. And Kevin, I can say the people that will pay attention to the sign are not the people we're having problems with. You know, unfortunately, they're the folks that are, and people don't look at their speedometers anymore. They drive as fast as they feel comfortable driving. And, you know, speedometers, signs, or whatever don't really matter. It's, they feel comfortable doing 50 in a 35. And so therefore they drive 50. And so there are things that you can do to narrow the road and just make it feel less comfortable to drive that fast. But there are instances where that doesn't even work. So you're constantly playing this whack-a-mole thing, and you do the best you can to tamper it down. But we're not going to stop speeding, but we just need to do the best we can to lower the average speed through neighborhoods that we can do. But to think that we're going to actually eliminate it, I want to say this because I don't think as council members we're doing our constituents a favor when we promise them we're going to stop speeding from happening in their neighborhood. We'll do our best to limit it and to moderate it, but stopping it is just about impossible. So if it's okay with the committee, I would like to ask for a recommendation to move this forward and have staff come back to us with a proposal for an educational component to this. And also a recommendation on the other things we talked about as far as a number of projects that they feel we can effectively accomplish in a year without without failing and letting our citizens down as far as their expectations. I don't know if we need a motion for that or if we just need to. If somebody wants to make a motion, that's fine.
So moved. I think Barbara Burke just made that motion.
Second.
Okay.
Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
Clear as mud?
I think so, unless staff has some questions for clarification.
I'm sorry.
I think the motion was clear unless staff needs clarification.
All right. That said, I think we've covered our agenda tonight.
Get a vote.
Do we need to vote? Yes, we do, I guess.
Councilmember Burke,
Mhm.
Yes.
Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Aye. Okay, now, I would like to adjourn the meeting. So thank you all very much and see you soon.
Thank you.
Be safe.